Chapter 2, Matthew. When Elund remembered the time that she last saw her best friend, it was when the woman came. Too many changes had happened in the village. Most recently was the retreat of Coedenice, who had gone when the message had got to them that the priests were coming to speak to the village elders. He comes all the way from Siluria, Elund's adopted mother, had told her, and Lancelot, approvingly. Elund instinctively slipped her hand into her brother's. Whence came Bishop Dewey to tell us of the living God? Owain, her adopted father, did not look as pleased. Elund watched his dark features rest on Coedenice, who was packing up everything he possessed, which wasn't a great deal, talking amongst the village, of whom nearly everyone had turned out. "Does Matthew have to go away too, father?" she asked him. Her mother turned to shush her, but Owain took up her other hand. "You have been good to help your mother in the house today, and with the harvest. Find Matthew and run off to play." And so, politics was put aside for Elund as she slipped from her father's side. Lancelot let go of her hand at the last moment, teasing that he might hold on to it longer, tightening his grip as her hand slipped away. Elund laughed and backed away from the crowd, pleased that she didn't have to witness one of the village elders be compelled to leave, regardless of the cheerful, sorrowful support he was receiving. Lancelot watched her cross over to the house where her best friend lived, born on the day that Elund had been recovered from the river. A dark feeling hung around Matthew, which concerned Lancelot greatly. Yet, his parents never saw it, or if they did, had little worries for her. He was about to call her back when his father's hand landed on his shoulders. "If this turns nasty, where would you rather Elund be?" Lancelot smiled, as a cheer went up from the villagers. Coedenice was popular and would be missed, but accepting the bishop was a direct order from Uther Pendragon, the king, and the village elders. Besides, his father, the image of Lancelot and broader in body for his work on the land, not lean from sword work. "You have taught her well. She has barely left your side since she learned to walk, and that," Owain nodded towards his son's hip, "has barely left your hand." If Elund and Matthew were challenged, it would be she, not he, who the attackers would fear. Lancelot laughed for a moment, and relaxed a little. She was ferocious when Bedu took young Madra's spear in the springtime. And, meeting the bishop, being as she is, their mother interjected. Lancelot saw her catch her husband's eye and fall silent. Whether Lancelot had decided at that moment to press the detail, or would have remained silent, he never knew. In times to come, he would ask himself if he had meant to, and if by the asking he might know something more. And by knowing something more, he might have prevented number. The truth was, Lancelot said nothing in reply to his mother's arrested sentence, and instead did not protest his adopted sister's running with Matthew, as she called him, Mathroy, in their Briton tongue. But she was no Briton. No amount of being raised in Wales, as the Say called their land, would ever change that. "After the harvest, I will go to Camelot," Lancelot told his father, as Coedenice was raised, shoulder height, and carried towards the bounds of the village. After harvest, Lancelot pressed. "I have decided." At his son's words, Owain Wygweder, Owain the farmer, took Lancelot by the shoulder and hauled him away from the village crowd, who were threatening, in their geniality, to let Shodnice fall from their shoulders. 5 of the village people immediately shouldered into the gap that Owain and Lancelot had created. Owain Wygweder glanced back to see his wife, or rather, if was looking towards them. Deciding that it was safe, Owain pulled Lancelot in front of him. "You fight like any knight I have ever seen," Owain counselled. "And we have had the Knights of Camelot in our village many times, with the Say only a few miles away. They steal our land, Lancelot," Owain added, pushing his head close to his son's ear, growling the words. "Overland down rivers, a broken bar with their ambition, a broken bar to take, a broken bar to plunder, a broken bar." Owain shook his head. "And they call us the foreigners." "Yes," Lancelot's father snapped the last word. "I am proud that you are my son who would be a knight. Go, my son, when you are ready." He glanced over his shoulder. Still was not looking their way. Whether noble or not, Show this stripling of a prince what you are made of. I will tell your mother a broken bar I will tell Elund. Owain the Gwydir saw the pained expression on his son's face. Of the three of them, Lancelot was to whom that baby had clung, who that child had followed, listened to, whose approval she had sought. And he thought, too, of the golden trinket wrapped beneath the covers of the baby's basket. This child had not carelessly been abandoned. Someone had placed their baby in that particular river knowing that the eel traps would stop it from traveling further and lost to sea. This prince is just a pup, his father added, with a breath of scorn in his voice. You will show him great things, as you have shown Elund, when she leaves us. Elund, leave us? Lancelot took a step back. He was shocked at his father's words. Why would Elund leave us? His father hesitated, then placed a hand on his son's shoulder. If you take a moment to think, you know why. But we cannot say it here, not today, not with Coednis leaving and Bishop Nennius due to arrive. Let her play, let her be. Lancelot and Owain turned back to the crowd as they began to walk with Coednis towards the outskirts of the village. And as much as he watched Elund, as the wheat was harvested and the corn stored for the winter, and the festivities a few weeks later when gluts of food were prepared and shared, the 10th put aside for collection for the Palace of Camelot, Elund watched Lancelot. 88,888,888. One day, a cart arrived, driven by a man who did not come from any of the surrounding villages. He had ale to sell, in small wooden casks. Haf and Owain were at the front of their house when news came to them and Elund followed her mother to the door. Owain watched Elund look across the village square to the house where Matthew and his uncle lived and put her hand to her shoulder. We are still trading and bartering the harvest goods, he told her. Yes, father, she told Owain. I may play with Matthew? You may, he told her. Most unusually, Owain then handed his daughter a short butchering blade. I fear for him, Owain added, no joking or humouring Elund. Matthew may well have to flee as Coednis fled. Coednis fled? Elund asked. Do not repeat what I have told you in front of your mother, Owain cautioned his adopted daughter. Neither she nor Lancelot know this, and it is better for Lancelot not to know, Owain told himself. Harvest is almost over, and I will have to tell her myself what has happened to her brother, and what a day that will be. So that day was hers, and Elund and Matthew played out in the woods, ate blackberries and drank the stream water and played at kings and knights with her blade as a sword and a straight, heat-hardened branch as a stave. Elund offered Matthew the butcher's knife but he shook his head. You know I don't need it, Matthew told her, lightness in his usually serious features. At once, Elund took her stance and thrust the blade towards him. Show me, she told him. They were deep enough in the forest that they should not be seen. Elund let the blade sit on her hand and watched Matthew as his eyes rested on it. It was an old trick, one he had shown her dozens of times when they went to play. But today, Elund felt a tinge of sadness, of loss, and wanted for all the world to hold on to the knife, as she wanted to hold on to Matthew, her friend, part of her heart. Grabbing at it, Elund pulled it out of the air. Matthew took his eyes from the weapon, then looked at her. You've spoiled it. Elund glared at her friend, then turned and began to stalk away, a cloud of confusion and anger and desperation trying to fold around her. Aeled. Matthew called after her, the boy name version of Elund, which was their own private joke. Come back. I didn't mean. He chased after her, and Elund heard the quickening feet behind her. I know you're going to go away, Elund accused her friend, and her heart broke more when, instead of denying it, Matthew dipped his head a little. Soon, my uncle says. Soon, before a broken bar. What do the Christians call it? Our broken bar. All Saints' Day a broken bar. Then I'll come with you, Elund shouted back to him, putting down the short sword. She buried it into the soil, point first, then sank down beside it. Father thinks I do not know about Lancelot leaving a broken bar. I will have nothing here, Elund told Matthew, who sank down beside her. Then, she turned to look at Matthew, pale skin contrasting vividly with black hair that curled a little, curled a lot when they had gone swimming, which was often, away from the village. when they were just the two of them. Elund could admit her heart's fear to him, only him a broken bar sometimes Lancelot, but not with this. Carefully, Matthew slipped his hand into Elund's and closed his fingers around hers. You will be leaving, Aled, but not with me, a broken bar, not with Lancelot, a broken bar I have seen. Seen what? Elund snapped hastily. That I will leave. She grabbed her hand back and folded her arms defiantly. I will follow you, I will follow Lancelot. No one can stop me from following you. And Matthew laughed, softly, tenderly, kindly, offering comfort, for he knew that they both knew Elund could not defy his sight. Will you have to go for long? Elund managed, as they sat in silence for some time, holding hands once more, listening to the forest. My brother says I must a broken bar, we must a broken bar find the great Emeries. Elund jerked her head. Then if it is just that, I will come with you, and you can't say I mustn't. I can wield a sword better than you, Matthew. And Elund went on, describing the people they would meet and the places they would go, both knowing it could never be. But we will meet again, Matthew reassured Elund, as they walked back towards their village, the long way, that took in a stream that could only be crossed by stone blocks that had been placed in a path, and through a winding path that took in beautiful scenery. At least Matthew thought it was beautiful. When we are older, when you have learned to use a full-sized sword, he added, at Elund's silent question. 88,888,888. They heard the shouting before they had even got to the first house in the village. Raised voices coming from somewhere near the meeting ground. A slammed door and a scuffle of boot on the ground, and more shouting. It was Elund's house, and the shouting had been coming from near the barn. I'm coming with you, said the usually reserved Matthew. He took Elund's hand as defensiveness in her mind softened a lit. Her friend had not left her yet. A throw of a wooden tub, where Half did her Monday washing, followed by the canes used as plant runners. Are you going to help, or not? The woman demanded, and as Elund and Matthew approached they could see it was Owain who was getting the brunt of her mother's outrage. Matthew pulled her to the barn door, and they crouched, listening to the argument. Then, Elund saw her mother heave out an old bed frame. You're not going to help, then? She demanded, as Owain put his fists on his hips, staring into the barn. She's your sister, Owain, and I swore that if she left with him, I would have nothing to do with her. His voice was low, affronted. I told her that. Yes, 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 snapped Half, throwing the bed frame through the door. And now she's back, from asking for our help, needing our help. Dear gods, do you think she would not come back here unless she had no other choice? A scuffling of her father's shoes and a creak of wood being picked up. Elund and Matthew watched as Owain the farmer moved the bed frame across the scrubby grass and into their house through the kitchen door. Mother. Elund, who had been about to stand up and go into the house after Owain, crouched back down as she heard Lancelot's voice. Anger swirled in her stomach again as she thought about his leaving. She has come back, Lancelot, they heard Half tell her son. Do you think that's what a broken bar? Her words trailed off as footsteps crunched on the ground. Elund stood up, but crouched back down again. Lancelot and Half walked past them, their voices carrying on the wind. She is your father's sister, Lancelot. Gods know I promised to look after the girl, bring her up as a Briton. A broken bar. I never thought I would come back a broken bar. Elund turned, looking to Matthew for a moment. His face, though impassive, was enough to tell her that he had guessed what she was thinking. Aled. Matthew called to her as Elund tore from his side, and he chased after her, catching up with her when she got to the door of the kitchen. Do you know? Elund rounded on him. Can you see this number? But you should find out, Aled. Find out if she's your mother. He lowered his voice and took Elund's hand again. I'm here. And so, Elund took some slow, silent steps to the threshold of the door that led into the front part of the house. At first, she saw nothing, for Lancelot and Half were doing something by the bed. As she looked, she could see a figure, almost the size of a child, pushing up blankets over herself. Illyri, Half was saying. You're home now. A weak hand moved from under the coverings, thin, almost skeletal, and placed it on Lancelot's forearm. The fingers closed over her brother's limb. "Oh, ain't a broken bar, oh, ain't a broken bar. I'm Lancelot, Aunt," Ilune's brother told the woman, gently. "I'm here." Ilune watched as her father stepped across the room. "Didn't I tell you to never come back here? Even Coedenis is gone from here." But his face softened as he leaned over the bed. Ilune saw him nod, then stand back up. "Yes, she is here. Your daughter," half reassured Ileri. "When you meet her, you will love her, sister. She is a Briton, like us all." But she broke off as Owain stepped backwards, reeling. "Why did you go to that man?" "Hush." Owain half crossed the room and spoke hastily to her husband. "You don't need to do this now." But Owain the farmer pushed past his wife and stood over the woman Ileri. "You went with him." "That a broken bar man, a broken bar, that Saxon." A crash beside him and Matthew looked around. Ilune had knocked over a kitchen table in her haste to get to her feet. Past him, Owain stormed, with half in his wake. Did she hear? Ilune? Lancelot was standing over Matthew, and he pulled him up by the shoulder. "Madra broken bar." She ran off. Matthew evaded. Then, because it was Lancelot, added, she heard 88,888,888. The search was not easy, but Lancelot found her eventually. It helped that she had thrust the blade that Owain had given to Ilune thrust into the ground beneath the tree she had climbed. "Ilune," he said softly, then waited. It always worked. And this time, though it took for the sun to move a hand's width across the sky, a crunching of boot on bark. "You're going away." Ilune's voice was even, calm. Lancelot turned to look at her, but she moved her head away. "Yes," he admitted. Ilune moved her golden head towards her brother. "So is Matthew." "Yes, and what will become of me?" Ilune cut across Lancelot's words, her fierceness channeling her anger, her despair. She grabbed Lancelot's sleeve. "I can come with you. When you leave, tell me I can't a broken bar." And her voice trailed away, for Ilune knew the answer. No half-say would be welcome at Camelot. In any case, Ilune bit her lip hard. Perhaps Matthew are broken bar, but he had said a name to his guardian, a broken bar. He had said the name Emrys, a broken bar. "Brother, tell me, am I say?" She gripped his sleeve harder. "Am I what father said?" Lancelot sank to the floor, leaning against the hazel tree and pulling Ilune beside him, and told her the story, Ilune's foundling story. "If you are," he finished, "the gods brought you here." And Lancelot took Ilune's hand in his. "The gods?" Ilune repeated, unable to keep the bitterness out of her voice. "Are we not now Christians? Did not Nennius come and baptize you all, and have you believe in the one true God?" SHS picked up the blade which Owain, in a couple of months, would use for the slaughtering of the beasts for the winter. "What will you do with that?" Lancelot asked. "Come with you." "Mother and father will not agree," Lancelot told her, still sitting on the ground. He knew Ilune's temper and he was using all the tactics he had in his arsenal to bring her down. But it wasn't yet working. "A broken bar, I don't want to go, Lancelot. I want to go to Camelot, with you. On with Matthew to find Emrys." "And what will you do, in the court of mighty Uther Pendragon?" "Little say." At this, Ilune brought the blade round in front of her, in a killing stroke that Lancelot had taught her. And then she sagged. "I am not say," Ilundid protested, and tears came. She stood before her brother and folded an arm across her eyes. And then she ran, leaving the blade and Lancelot. Matthew was waiting by his brother's house as she tore out of the forest, waiting for her. "What will I become?" Ilune asked of her best friend, as they walked slowly down their path that led to the lake. "No man wants a say for a wife." "I will be a druid," Matthew told her. "You should join me. The druids would only judge you for your greatness." Ilune stopped walking and faced Matthew, taking both his hands in her own. "I have no magic, you know this." "Then fight, Aled," Matthew replied. "Be a Briton, if you choose to be." "Not everyone has magic. What would the world be like if all the people could do what I can do?" "Show me again," Ilune begged. And around them, lights, brilliant and bright dances around them. Despite herself, Ilune smiled. "I wish a broken bar. I wish that Half and Owen were my real parents," she told Matthew, as they walked on. He took up her hand, and there were only the two of them in world, Aeled and Matthew. Then you wouldn't be you. Elund took Matthew's other hand and hoped, wished, with her might, that when they returned to the village, everyone would come to her and tell her they were mistaken, that she had been sent down the Hayfren river as a game. The Say killed and plundered and murdered, she told Matthew, echoing what she had heard her father a broken bar had heard Owain a broken bar say. She was Britain, she knew it, she willed it. Shortly after they returned, and she saw Matthew leave with his brother, Half brought Elund into the front room, and told her that her mother, Ileri, was dying. And she sat beside the woman, for all the good it did, and her future started from then, changed, leaving her old life as a book, though able to be read, could not be changed, and was fixed, as a moment in time. "What is my father's name?" Elund asked, as Ileri passed from life into the beyond, in the early hours of the next morning. Half jerked her head, in the process of wrapping her sister-in-law's body, while Owain stood in the corner of the front room, glowering over the scene. But Half would not be drawn, and Owain did not even move at Elund's question, save his eyes, resting on her with hatred, yes, hatred, for being who she was. She would never feel her father's arms around her, or kiss her head as he used to. The next time she returned to the village, Owain would be dead. It was Lancelot who stood in the doorway, eyes on Elund, and who finally put his hand out to her. And they walked in the forest that Elund loved so well, with the man who was not her brother, but her cousin. "I am your brother still," Lancelot told her. "You're my cousin. Ileri is your aunt, and some say is supposedly my father." Elund trembled, not with fear, well, perhaps some fear, but anger, that her world had turned in on itself and become some kind of caricature, where she was not one of her family, where she was now a hated Say. "Half and Owain are your parents, Elund." But Lancelot's words were hollow. The truth changed everything. She looked to Lancelot. "When do you go to Camelot?" "After the harvest," he told her. "And how long does it take to get there?" "It's 5 days southwest." "Then I will miss you." Elund stood on tiptoe and placed her lips on his cheek. And she resolved to be brave, and she was, through the funeral, the burial, the harvest, and Lancelot's farewell. Half tears making up for Elund's lack of them. Lancelot did leave, and fear and confusion and anger annealed to determination. It might have been the last time Elund was to see Lancelot, or Matthew for that matter. It wouldn't be. Early one morning, before even Owain had risen, as the days grew shorter and the birds flocked to trees and bushes, gathering for their annual disappearance south, Elund dressed and left her village. The Say were her people. Britons never would accept her, nor let her forget. Oh, it would start out well, but, being the gossipy people they were, they would find out, sooner or later, and she would be an outsider again, more outside than even the Druids, who were as part of every Briton as their own heartbeat. Uther Pendragon was a fool if he thought he could tear the heart from his people. Elund walked east, to Logre, to the land lost to the Say, pondering the moments when she last saw Matthew and last saw Lancelot, the last time she would see the two people dearest to her in the world. As lush valleys and food-giving rivers gave way to a flatter land, and the voices of the people changed to that of the incomers from across the sea, Elund resolved to put Lancelot and Matthew out of her head, and her heart, and make a living amongst the Say. Her people. How little she knew. How little she knew about a lot of things. Elund would laugh at the naivety of herself in the future, for she would see them, and Elund's heart would soften, and color and happiness would pour into her world once more. Beauty broken bar. Beauty broken bar. At the last, with Lancelot, and Matthew, in the heat and battle of Camelot, the circumstances would be broken bar. A broken bar, terribly broken bar.